wants to see it, they can see it on Brightspace later on. All right. Okay, let's see if I can get this to full screen. Can y'all see that?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Sometimes it has issues when you go from the full screen, like when you're looking at stuff like this. Okay. All right. So the reason I'm doing this optional lecture is because, we didn't have classes yesterday, and I teach the principles of macro on Monday, and I want them to stay aligned, so I give the tests like back to back the same week. Because if I don't, it kind of like makes it where you're doing different stuff each week from between each class, and it makes it a lot easier if I just do everything on the same schedule. And so we'll have later on, there'll be a Tuesday where we're out, this class is out. And so I'll give the optional lecture for the Monday class on that Monday before on President's Day observance. All right. So my research is dealing with digital currency. It's kind of one of the reasons why I chose to do this. So every time the email goes off, I'll check here to see if it's somebody about the class. Sorry. Let's see. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, so like I said, I'll go over kind of some of the basics of cryptocurrency. That's kind of where my research is at. I had a paper published, last year, kind of looking specifically at, cryptocurrency, can it be a medium of exchange? How we'll introduce in the banking system that, provides security for these private keys and things like that. How that influence how it circulates and is being exchanged. But let's just start off here, kind of like some background here. So in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto, or whoever this is, or it could be a conglomeration of people. It's kind of a pseudonym. He introduced Bitcoin as alternative to the centralized financial system. So when he introduced this, we were kind of going through like a really bad financial crisis. There was a lot of uncertainty. The central banks were doing a lot of unprecedented things with money supply, like lending and stuff like this. And so there was a lot of concern of potential, like really having high levels of inflation. Now, it never came to fruition, but at the time, people weren't so sure about that. And so he was like, okay, so here's a potential way, to conduct business, to store value and money. That's not part of this centralized financial system. So what was unique about this? There were talks of a digital currency for a good little while before that, but like nobody was ever really able to come up with like a proof of work protocol to ensure like who owns what Bitcoin. And this is kind of the innovation they came up with this proof of work algorithm that Satoshi came up. This is a way to like, okay, you can be sure that, even though it's not centralized, it's decentralized. Like we don't have like one person you trust to take care of this. The way this system's set up, you can be assured that, what the algorithm or the ledger says, who has what Bitcoin is truthful. All right, that was a big innovation. We'll go into a little bit more of that later on. So today, Bitcoin, it still remains the most popular cryptocurrency, but there's been lots of more released. Most of them are junk. There's really, just complete, just for fun, meme coins, or just, some of the things, some of the ideas may eventually, but most of the stuff, it's probably not going to work out. But here's three that are, I do consider like legitimate types of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, of course. Now its market cap's around $2 trillion, quite a bit. Its price yesterday was around 103,000 per coin. Ethereum, it's a little bit different. It's aimed. Now, you can still do peer-to-peer transactions like you do with Bitcoin. You can store value on it and all that. But its big aim is like to try to like provide innovation in decentralized finance. So it has the second largest market cap at 400 billion. All right, its price is around 3,292. Now Ripple, it's a lot different than these first two. These are really decentralized. Anybody can do it. Ripple's kind of like working within our current banking system. All right, so it's mainly just for banks that are already established as part of the system now. It's just a tool or a method for them to be able to like, people to be able to spend money overseas, a lot cheaper than what they're doing it now. Because currently, like if you want to, you want to transfer money or spend money overseas, like say for a company that does business overseas, you have to pay somebody to hold on to your currency, there for you. And when you're doing that, they're going to charge you money for it. So this kind of does away with that. And its aim is to be a cheaper way for these banks to conduct business. Right. Okay, so who came up with the ideas for digital currency? These were the cypherpunks. When I always hear the name, I always think about this scene from Matrix. Now, of course, the real cypherpunks, they're just ordinary looking people. They don't wear black spandex leather or whatever. So they saw where the world was going. This is hard for y'all to imagine, but there was no internet when I was growing up. But they saw this. They were kind of on the frontier of that. They were using things like Usenet, communicating with a lot of these people in the computer science area. They knew where things were going in the 80s, even though it was about 10 years later before it started catching on. And they knew well, because of this, all this information is going to be out there, and there could be bad actors that could take advantage of it. Corporations could take advantage of that, with taking away one of the things that we talk about. That's how they can take away the consumer surplus, because they can get a lot of information that they normally wouldn't have by collecting information that's out there on the internet. Potential issues with the government collecting data on you too. There's a lot of different issues here that you could come up with, and they saw this, and they consider privacy a big thing here. All right, so they wanted to come. Okay, what's some way you can conduct business online where people can't keep track of you? All right, and so they knew, okay, we need a digital currency to be able to do that. So some notable cypherpunks: Julian Assange, he was the founder of WikiLeaks. Nick Szabo, he kind of had a theoretical first go at this Bitcoin. It was called BitGold. He also talks a lot about smart contracts. These are really important for Ethereum with decentralized finance. All right. So what are the two big things they wanted with this private digital currency? Well, I need to be able to perform two important functions. One is to maintain privacy during the transaction. So this is what you have when you use cash. All right. So you could do that now, when you're using cash, you're conducting a transaction. It could be, the main thing here is we're not talking about necessarily legal stuff. They want people to conduct legal transactions, but maybe it's good that not everybody knows about this. All right, there's no trail with it. So when you go online, of course, you can't use cash, right? It's not possible to do that. So that's where digital currency would come into play. And you want it to be censorship resistant. Okay. Nick Szabo was saying it's trusted third parties or security holes. An example of this, what am I talking about censorship resistant? Well, this is kind of an issue ongoing now. Federal law has marijuana where it's illegal, but a lot of state laws have legalized it. And so because the banking system is regulated at the federal level, a lot of times they won't do business with anybody that owns a marijuana shop. Right? So they're kind of kept from being part of these banking systems as that. They want some sort of medium of exchange where people don't have to worry about this. Right? You're not doing anything wrong. Your state says it's legal, you should be able to do that. This is what would be their view on this. You should have some way to conduct business, store money without having to worry about it, carry it around just in cash under your mattress or something like that, right? Okay, so this presents two issues though. How do you maintain this privacy? How do you let people maintain privacy? And also, the censorship resistant. This is where it comes into play where, you need some sort of decentralized ledger where you don't have some trusted third party that can exclude you from the financial system. All right. They want it to be inclusive where nobody has to worry about being excluded like this. So it needs to be decentralized. So that presents some issues, and we'll talk about that later on as well. First, let's just start off. Let's talk about what's involved here with a Bitcoin transaction, some little basics. So let's say that Alice wants to send Bob 1 Bitcoin. Okay. So Alice, they won't be her name. What it'll be an address. Okay, that she has. She has an address. You could think of it, it's not exactly like a bank account, but think of it, it's similar to like a bank account. And she has some money associated, some amount of Bitcoin associated with this address. Okay. So she wants to send this 1 Bitcoin over the Bitcoin network to Bob's address. Okay. So what steps need to take place for this transaction to be verified here? All right. First of all, too, also with Bitcoin, first of all, it's a payment system, very similar to PayPal, right? Except the difference here, it has its own unique, native medium of exchange here. Whereas PayPal uses dollars, euros, other medium of exchange. The Bitcoin network, when you're making transactions on it, it uses its own native, token here. All right, that's what's kind of unique about it. I mean, it's not, exchangeable for anything else. It's its own value here. Okay, so let's talk about these two steps for this Bitcoin transaction. For it to process this transaction, first you need to verify that it is indeed Alice is at the message, right? She can't show an ID. That's not how you do it here. She doesn't have somebody keeping track. Okay, this is her bank account. She does have this number. Because you want to maintain this privacy, you have to, there's some things that have to be done because of this. Now, what's used with this cryptography has been around for a long time. And this latest advancement that we had, like in the late 70s, 80s, this kind of double key cryptography, it's been around for about 40 years or so. So nothing new was used here. It was just kind of used, they just kind of took advantage of the technology that was already there. The second part, the double spending problem is, how can we be sure that Alice has not spent this money before here? How can we keep track of this? This was the problem for the digital currency that kind of held it up for a long time for whenever being released here. Okay, so if you'll note here, this is an example of a Bitcoin address. As you can see, it's what's known as hexadecimal, so it uses letters and numbers. Okay, and you see it's really long. You can't memorize this. And this private key will come into play later on. This plays an important part of maintaining this privacy and providing proof that it actually is you that's trying to spend this money at your address here. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the privacy. This is where you need to be able to provide some sort of digital signature or some sort of stamp saying that's, hey, this is me here, actually me behind this address here that's trying to send it. I'm the actual owner here. So kind of a good example, to kind of compare the Bitcoin addresses is pseudonyms or pen names. These are often used in the past. A lot of the founders of the U.S., they use a pseudonym because they didn't want the British government to know who they were when they were writing political tracts and stuff like that. But a kind of a current day example would be J.K. Rowling. She was real popular from the Harry Potter, and she wanted to write some other books, but she didn't want people to be influenced by the fact that, she was a popular author. So she went by a pen name of Robert Galbraith, and she released some books as a result of that. All right, so that's an example of a pseudonym. Samuel Clemens is the same way. He went by the pen name of Mark Twain. In fact, that's what most people know him by is Mark Twain. Okay, so here with these pseudonyms, these pen names, anything like that, some information about this individual, but you don't know everything. You don't know their true ID, is the word to think about. But you do have some things that are associated with them. These writings were Mark Twain, in the same way with Robert Galbraith, but you don't know exactly who they are. Okay, so you get some privacy with that. Kind of example I like to use here when we bring up this digital signature. There's this movie called The Scarlet Pimpernel. It was around, he was a English aristocrat. He had a lot of friends who were French aristocrats during the French Revolution. And of course, they were getting their heads chopped off. So he obviously, they were his friends, so he wanted to try to help them. And in order to help him, he needed to keep his identity secret, because if they found out who he was, while he was in France, they could nab him, of course, and put him to the guillotine. Okay, here he is on his way to, rescue some of his friends from the guillotine in disguise. So the thing about this, people knew who he was. They knew of his deeds and what he was doing, what his aims were and all that, but they didn't know his identity. All right, so this presents a problem. He needs to be able to communicate to people that are with him, his allies, without the Jacobins. Those are the people that took over the French government, without obtaining his identity. Okay, and so what he did was, if he was sending a message, he signed it with this wax insignia. Okay, this is proof that, hey, this is me that's actually sending it, without giving away his true identity. And so talking about these wax insignias, one way that they made them kind of hard to counterfeit, because there would be little small subtle difference. like imperfections in them that made it kind of difficult to replicate here. So that's one of the things that was kind of neat here with this. But they would use this, they'd wrap the letter up, right, put the wax and stamp it and say, this is me. That's what this private key is going to do. It's going to it doesn't stamp it, but like it's going to digitally sign any of these messages that you send on the Bitcoin network where you want to transfer money. Okay. So let's go into more detail. Let's go back here to this. All right. So here's this Bitcoin address. So this could be Alice or someone else. All right. They want to send some money on the Bitcoin network, but they need to prove that it's actually them here. All right. So what they need to do is they need to have this private key. It's mathematically related to this Bitcoin address, and they need to use it to create a digital signature. All right. So you can see this is really long. You can't memorize that. So that's going to come into play here in a minute. I'll talk about this a little bit more. And another important thing, like I said, they are mathematically related. That allows us to be, to sign it and for someone else to verify it with a different key here. But it's also mathematically related to the Bitcoin address. All right, so here's kind of how this works. The private key has to be chosen randomly. This is real important because this needs to be kept secret here. Your private key needs to be only known by you, because if someone else gets it, they can pretend to be you and spend your money. Okay. So what goes on here? Well, this private key is put into some sort of mathematical function. It produces this public key. Okay. Now, this public key is available for everyone. Importantly, here, it's available for people on the Bitcoin network where they can verify these messages. All right. And this public key is used, it's run through two different functions. It creates a hash of the public key, and then they use this other function that kind of shrinks the size of the hash of the public key, and that's your Bitcoin address. This is kind of where you store your Bitcoin at, and this is where you have like say if Alice at her address she had 20 Bitcoins, this would be where it's stored at, like right here, this Bitcoin address. All right, so let's talk about this process here where Alice sends money to Bob. How does this work? This public key cryptography. So Alice, she writes this message. She wants to send 1 Bitcoin from her address to Bob's address. All right. The problem is well, how do you verify it's actually her? Well, what she's going to do, she's going to sign it and saying, hey, this is me here. So she's going to use her private key along with this message. She's going to put them into a signature function, and it's going to spit out this digital signature. Okay. All right. What happens next? Well, here's where the Bitcoin network, these people that verify, these nodes that verify it. And so how do they verify this is actually her? All right. They take the signature. They use this public key they have that's associated with this Alice's address as well. Along with the message, they use it as input into this verification function. And it'll say yay or nay, where it's actually, the person that's behind the address or not. Okay. And so if that takes place, all right, then this transaction is put into a queue where, miners who verify and add these functions to the ledger can take it and add it later on here. So this is the first part here, where the verification part where, okay, you actually prove that you're the person behind it. Now, there is a drawback. There is some issues with this, and that is, first of all, this private key, it's really important you keep it private, right? Let nobody see it, because they can take it and they can pretend to be you with it. And once these transactions takes place, there's no take backs. There's no really legal means to get your money back like you can with credit card ID theft and things like that. So it's really important that you keep track of it. And as you see, it's really long. You can't memorize it. So you have to store this somewhere safe, somewhere to keep it, where no one can get track of it. Because like I said, if the hackers or someone gets hold of it, they can just go and empty out your addresses. Okay. All right. So what are some of the ways to store it? Well, there's 2 classifications here. You can store it in hot storage or cold storage. Hot storage is where it's actually connected to the internet. All right. Now the issue with this is because it's connected to the internet, this makes it susceptible to hackers, right? One of the ways you can do it is with a mobile wallet. The other is with a desktop wallet. And so these wallets, what they'll do, they'll generate these private keys for you, and they'll go through the process of going on the network and broadcast these transactions you want to try to make and so on. All right. The problem here is you have to worry about hacking malware. So encryption needs to be used. The mobile wallets are a lot better at dealing with this than the desktops. I don't know if you probably noticed this when you're using your iPhone or your Android as compared to your desktop. You have a lot more issues with malware on your desktop than you do like with your mobile phone. Okay, so the same thing holds true here when you're dealing with people trying to like hack and get your private keys. Now the mobile wallet is more less susceptible to this, but you know you could lose your mobile wallet, your mobile phone, or it could get damaged. In either one of these cases, this could lead you to lose track of your private keys. Okay, so there is always this risk here. And so essentially you should really avoid using holding any large sums on any sort of, you know, desktop or, mobile wallet like this. Okay. Now, where do most people, the safe way to secure, just to keep your private keys, that's to keep them offline, in what's known as cold storage. Okay. One of the ways to do this is just with a paper wallet. As you'll notice here, this money itself is not worth anything. All right. What it is though, this is a way to keep track of your private key here. Okay. You can use that, scan the barcode, and you can use it to make a transaction. So this, you don't want to keep this in your just lying around your house or in your wallet or anything like that. You want to keep these somewhere stored safe. So the Winklevoss twins, the first Bitcoin like billionaires, they had all their private keys like on these paper wallets, but they had like a bunch of copies in several different banks in case something happened where the bank burned down on it. So they were really, really risk averse with this here. So this is one way that you can keep it. But most people use a hardware wallet. This is how they keep track of their private keys. If they want to keep track of it themselves. A lot of people outsource it to these online exchanges and stuff. But most people that keep track of themselves, they use these hardware wallets. It's essentially very similar to a flash drive, except there's going to be a passcode to get into it. Okay, that's kind of the essential difference here. All right, this is the most secure way to store these private keys here. All right. Now, the downside to this, what if you forget your password? All right, what if you damage your device here? Well, they came up with one kind of solution here with this. If it gets damaged, if you write down this sequence of words here, the seed code, if you have that, you can buy another device, use the seed, these words that you have for your seed code, and you can pull up and get access to your private keys again. Okay, but it's still, you still need to keep up with these phrases though that you have here. All right, if you lose track of that, you'll still lose access to your private keys. Okay, so this is a really big issue early on. All right, in fact, Chainalysis, there's these forensics analysis firm here. They will help a lot of times these help Interpol and like different governments track down cyber criminals. They did an estimate where around 3 to 4 million Bitcoin had lost. At the time, it was around 17 to 23% of the money supply at that point. All right, so this is a real issue, with losing track. This is something that, for this reason alone, a lot of people just they don't want to keep track of themselves. It's too much of a hassle. So it presents some interesting issues. One example here. There was this guy here in this article. He's talking about where he was using some sort of malware. He was gaining access to people's computers' computational power, and he was using that to mine Bitcoin. And somehow they found out about it. They tracked him down, and it says they seized his Bitcoin. But that's the issue here. They did arrest him for it, and they are aware of this Bitcoin that he has, but he won't turn over the private keys to access it here. So it's essentially like this. They're locked out from it. They could see it on the blockchain where it's at, but they're not aware, that they have no means to get access to it. That's kind of prevents an interesting dilemma there for the police here. Because a lot of times they fund themselves, like when they track down criminals, they use the funds they get from that to kind of, pay for additional means of going after criminals here. So this is kind of a unique situation here that they may be dealing with going forward, is like actually gaining access to this Bitcoin where they can use it. What they can do is go to these different online exchanges, say, hey, do not accept any money that comes from these addresses. Don't accept this because this is a criminal. You shouldn't have access to this money and so on. But actually getting to assess those is a little more difficult. Now, this second is kind of a popular account here. There was this German programmer. He's in San Francisco, and he had close to around, at the time, it's probably more than that now, probably about 400 million, around $400 million worth of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. He had the private keys stored on what's called an iron key flash drive. And so it has a passcode to get into it. And for whatever reason, he misplaced his passcode and he can't remember what it was. So he tried 8 times, 8 different passcodes that he thought they may be, things that he's used before, but none of them worked. And the thing with these iron key flash drives is after 10 attempts, it will lock you out. You can't gain access to it all. So if he tried it 2 more times, he will be permanently locked out of it, and he essentially lose out on access to this. I think it's, like I said, around now about $300 or $400 million worth of cryptocurrency. Okay, so this is kind of a good illustration of some of these things that's happened here, like with people forgetting these passwords and losing just a lot of money here as a result of that. So that's got to be extremely frustrating. It became such a big problem that there's actually this professional hypnotist. He charges a half Bitcoin plus a recovery fee to help people recall these passwords, to these hardware wallets that they have where they're storing these private keys. I'm not sure how effective it is, but obviously if he's doing it and he doesn't charge until it's actually recovered, he's obviously probably helped some people, like recall like a 8-digit password and stuff like that. That's usually what they are. They're about 8 digits usually. All right. So this shows kind of one of the issues here, like it's this issue of scale, these new technology like this, like whereas cash, it's difficult to carry around in large sums. You're not going to misplace $200 million in cash like Stefan did here with because he's potentially get locked out of access to his private keys. Okay, and so because of this hassle, and because there is this potential loss, most people just outsource their security to someone else. So most people, like if they invest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, they just let the online exchanges keep track of it for you. Somebody professionally that's kind of used to doing it here. Okay. All right, so that's kind of part one. That's kind of one of the interesting things that are associated with it. And this has some like unique equilibrium properties for like a money. And actually, in some cases, can make it more likely to have like a stable equilibrium. That's kind of one of the things I talk about in my research. Now let's go to the second part here. It is this double spending problem. This issue with double spending. Okay, so this is because these Bitcoin, they're just digital files that, it's just numbers that can be copied. How can you make sure that someone's not sending it more than once here? Well, they have this verification thing to ensure that you can't just completely counterfeit. You can't just make money out of thin air. It doesn't, because of the way it's set up, it deals with that. But there could be a case, though, where someone tries to send it more than once. How can you make sure they don't do that? That's kind of the big issue here, this double spending problem here. Okay? And so the way that you do this normally, all right, with your checking accounts and money where you like that, is you have these financial systems, the banks and all that, they keep track of these ledgers for everyone to make sure that nobody does anything with this, right? They keep track of who owns what money. But the issue with this is, these cypher, they wanted to get away with it. They wanted digital currency where you don't have to worry about this issue here of a trusted third party, right? They're potential security here. They may potentially censor you or exclude you from the financial system. Okay. And so in order to get away from this problem, you need to have some sort of decentralized ledger where anybody can add transactions or can record transactions on it. Okay. The problem with this, it makes it kind of difficult to keep track. Everybody kind of has an incentive to maybe potentially lie if it's involving their transaction. All right. So how can you be sure? How can you trust who does what? Okay. And so this kind of brings up kind of an older problem first came to light in the field of computer science, and that's what's known as the Byzantine generals problem. Okay, and so the problem first arose here when you're wanting to send information over a computer network. All right, What about if what if one of these relays are kind of damaged and it's sending out faulty information? Okay. So what you want to have is like, okay, all right, as long as 2/3 of these relays are sending good information, we should be able to ascertain like the true information. Okay. And that's where it comes from, the Byzantine generals problem. All right. So the example they use is like, okay, there's this king here, and he wants to like attack, make an attack. He's got all his generals, they're kind of separated, they're communicating with one another. There's always this problem. What if one of them turns traitor? They may send faulty information. Then he may try to attack at a certain time and no one knows about it, and he goes to attack and he gets defeated. All right. So they need to come up with some way to, okay, how can we communicate with this? As long as the majority of my generals are truthful, we can, ascertain whether, we can coordinate one another with like the truthful information. All right, that's what they want to do here. They want it to be where, as long as the majority of the people are being honest on this network that are recording it, then you can be rest assured that you're actually seeing like the actual truthful information here, who owns what Bitcoin. All right, so let's kind of go back to some of these precursors to Bitcoin. So came up with what's known as B Money, and Nick Szabo with BitGold. Now they both did something that similar to what Bitcoin uses. That is, money creation came from solving a kind of a difficult numerical puzzle. This put like where you had to put some effort into creating money. You couldn't just be like created without using no effort here. They took advantage. They used the public key cryptography to maintain the privacy. Okay, it used the public ledger. BitGold did. The problem was, for both of these, there really was no way to have like a consensus mechanism. That is, okay, how can we be sure that what we see here is true? Everybody can record on this, but they all potentially have an incentive here to potentially lie if it's dealing with their money. So how can we be sure that it's truthful or not? Okay, so this is where Satoshi found the solution for it, and what he used here was what's known as the proof of work protocol. Okay, so thinking about this issue is kind of a branch of game theory. I don't know if anybody's going even further, like going to be an econ major or if anybody's going to be econ or major, potentially you may take a class in game theory. And one of the things that they talk about is what this branch of it is called mechanism design. And here it's talking about, okay, how can you design a system where everybody that's involved with it, these agents that are involved with the system, that they actually have an incentive to be truthful. It actually it rewards them to be truthful with this. Okay. And so that's what they do here. The principle would be the creator, Satoshi. He created a mechanism here that made these agents that are involved with the Bitcoin network, these Bitcoin miners, these people that are recording on this ledger, they actually have an incentive to be truthful here. Okay. And because of the way you set this up, you can be assured that the ledger is accurate. Okay. And so here, this is a anonymous student from this course at Cornell. This is kind of a good summation of what's going on here. So Bitcoin is special because it incentivizes agreement across a decentralized network. All these miners, they're competing with one another, right? They're not working together. Right? They're actually only concerned about themselves. Okay, so they're competing with one another. They're rivals. Okay, and you can win a reward by processing transactions, but there's only one reward per transaction. And so the next winner must acknowledge the previous winner. You have to say, okay, this is truthful. They follow the rules. All right, we can be sure this is a truthful transaction. All right. And so for order for it to go on, unless these people just, if they don't, acknowledge it, if no one acknowledges, then no one gets a reward. And so like it hurts them. So they have an incentive here, to accept it and to kind of go along to someone like, gets this reward and gets to record this next transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this proof of work protocol, the blockchain. So the blockchain is just the way this public ledger is organized. Okay. So here, this is just kind of, visualizing this Genesis block. This was this first public record of the Bitcoin here. These first transactions that took place, these first Bitcoins that are created here and that are rewarded to people was on this Genesis block. Okay. And the way this is set up they want it to be on average every 10 minutes, a new block is added with new transactions where people are sending Bitcoin from one address to the next. Okay. And so these blocks are added to one another. And they want it to be, like I said, on average, where they're created and added every 10 minutes. So this is the way these transactions are stored. So that's why, they can kind of have an idea of, when they're like added, because, the timestamp and in what order they're being added on this blockchain here. Okay. So in order for these blocks to be added, they have to follow like a certain set of rules here. Okay. One big thing is this level of difficulty. Like, how hard is it to solve this problem to actually be able to add it on here? Okay. So that's part of it. That's what these miners are competing when they're doing that. Essentially, what they're doing is guessing on this. And the faster that you can guess, the more computational power, the more you can like run these functions that you do here, the more likely you are to like get this, come up with a block that's acceptable and add it to the Bitcoin network and receive this reward of new Bitcoins that's created to the money supply. Okay. So it's kind of probabilistic. Like if you have half of the Bitcoin network's computational power, well, there's a 50% chance that you'll add this next block. If you have 30% of the computational power, well, there's a 30% chance that you'll get to add this next block, and so on. Okay. And as far as like which blockchain that people consider truthful, what's the one with the most level of difficulty, the most blocks added to it? That's the one that everyone, agrees on. Okay, this is the one that will accept. I'll try to add on a new block to this one. Okay. So like I said, these miners are competing to add these new blocks. Well, why are they using their computers and use a lot of energy to do this? Well, they get these rewards, right? Like I mentioned, they get these newly created Bitcoins. Now it used to be 50 at the start. Now it's down to like 3.125 Bitcoins rewarded, plus any transaction fee that's associated with it. All right. This is the reward for them doing this here. Okay. Another important thing here is, like I said, they want this Bitcoin money supply to grow at like a certain pace here. All right. So what happens is the algorithm will adjust the level of difficulty to create and add these new blocks. Every 2016 block, which is on average about every 2 weeks, it'll adjust. Okay. If the Bitcoin miners are adding it too fast, what they'll do is they'll increase the difficulty to slow it down. All right. They want to have it where like every 4 years they create a certain amount and then they have this reward. And they want the money supply to be completely exhausted, because like every 4 years, the reward halves. And by the year 2140, they want no more Bitcoin to be created. And they want the total to be 21 million. That's going to be the cap on the money supply here for Bitcoin. Now, this is important. This is an important reason for what we know why people give it value in the first place, because they knew that the money supply was limited. Otherwise, if you just create them really easily and the money supply was unlimited, you didn't know how many was going to be created. This would make people be kind of wary of ever giving it value in the first place here. All right, so this is all tied in with this proof of work algorithm that he has here. Kind of neat the way everything works out. Now, there is still a potential here for someone, to do a double spending attack. That is, like I said, you can't just create these Bitcoins out of thin air, but it is potential with a double spending attack that you could potentially spend it twice. You send someone money on the Bitcoin network to the address, and there's a way to potentially attack it and erase that transaction and spend the money again. This will be what's known as a double spending attack. Now, the problem is you need a majority of the network's computational power to be able to pull this off here. Otherwise, it's not rational to do it. Okay? And another thing that kind of keeps people being kind of tending to do this, even with the majority of the network spending power, the successful attack will cause people to lose trust, and this will decrease the value of Bitcoin. If you start seeing these double spending attacks take place, well, this Bitcoin that you're holding won't be valuable anymore. It won't be worth anything. So it really doesn't make sense for these miners to do that. All right. The only problem, was kind of brought up by this economist Eric Budish. He talked about once you're able to kind of, now you can like actually short Bitcoin. And so it could become a point when it becomes valuable enough. Potentially someone may have an incentive, okay, I spend a lot of money to mine this and like I'm going to lose a lot of value if I do this. But if I short this Bitcoin, this potential, or it may be actually worth my while to do it. So it is something that could potentially be an issue like later on in for Bitcoin. But right now, first of all, no one has a majority of the computational power to even be rational to try to pull one off. But like I said, even if that is the case, like it doesn't really make sense to try to do that. One potential thing that someone could do, and this has to be somebody like a large government like the U.S., China, Russia. Maybe they see that another country really depends on this Bitcoin system and they don't. Maybe they want to attack it. They want to cause harm to this other country, their financial system, whatever, if they're tied in a lot with the Bitcoin. There's a potential here where, they're not worried about losing money on it. It might be worth their while to kind of, damage the credibility of Bitcoin and hurt some other country. And so they call this a Goldfinger attack. So they get this from the Bond movie Goldfinger. So there's this villain called Goldfinger. He wants to set off a nuclear bomb inside, Fort Knox, where a lot of the gold's held. This would make the gold where you couldn't use it for a long time. So this would crash the gold money supply. This would make the gold that he had more valuable and give him a lot of power essentially here. So he wants to crash the system. This is essentially there is a potential here where somebody might want to do this. They just want to crash the Bitcoin system. They're not worried about losing money. They have some other motive here where they want to cause harm to someone else. Okay, so that kind of explains, a little bit of a detail, some of these things that are involved, with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Is it a viable medium of exchange or, money here? So there's kind of some issues for Bitcoin. That is, one of the things is you can only process so many transactions on the blockchain at one time. And you need to be able to, for a medium of exchange, you need to be able to have a high processing speed here. You need to be able to process a lot of transactions at once. So this is one of the problems they're facing here. Now they're coming up with some solutions here. Theoretically, they're there with it. They just have to work it out where it works in practice. This Lightning Network's a solution here. I think eventually this will be worked out. There's a neat little article here in this in these slides. I'll post these so I'll make them available for people too. They had this in El Salvador where they have this Lightning Network Shiba that people are using, but a lot of times it doesn't work. Right? Most of the time it doesn't work. So they're still kind of dealing with some issues with that. All right. But I think eventually though, this problem could be dealt with. The volatility, dealing with this from not being able to process it quick enough. Plus just any sort of new technology, people are kind of slow to adapt to it. There's always some issues with bringing it into people up to speed with it. So that's another thing. But the one thing that I think that'll keep it from ever being a really good money, and that is just the volatility associated with the value of it, just kind of fluctuating a lot. As far as a store of value in the long run, so far Bitcoin seems like a pretty good asset. But with the money, it's not so much that how it gains over a long period of time. What you're interested in is it being stable in the short run. All right, that's what you want with the money. You get paid in your paycheck with your money that you're going to use. You want to be able to go to the store that next week and it to maintain its value of what you got paid for it with, right? You don't want it to fluctuate up and down. Now it's great, of course, if the value goes up, but when it goes down, you may not be able to pay for your bills or your groceries and stuff like that. So you want your money to be really stable. And the way the Bitcoin network's set up, the algorithm and everything, it actually makes this volatility even worse. So I don't think this is an issue that could ever be resolved here. But I do consider, Bitcoin, it does have some properties with it. I think it is probably a good investment as far as as long as you don't keep it, as long as you keep it to a small percentage of your portfolio. Just like with gold, there are cases where, certain cases where it could be very helpful to have some Bitcoin or, some stable coins or, gold. So what are some current use cases we'll end on this? So in some places, the inflation's so bad that it's actually, even with the volatility, it can actually be better holding your wealth in Bitcoin. So you see some cases of people, they get paid in the Venezuelan bolivars. The bolivars are losing so much value so fast. People are transferring over their money into Bitcoin and holding it like that. Now the issue with this, there's a lot of effort that goes into it. It's not really simple, because most merchants won't accept it. So you got to exchange it from bolivars to Bitcoin to hold it, and then when you're ready to spend it, you got to exchange it back to the local currency. Because it's a pretty big hassle, but because it's worth it if you know nobody can do it, because you can save a lot of your value of your money doing this here. One of the neatest examples of Bitcoin being used here is from Nigeria. This comes from remittance payments. If they're in England or the US and they're sending money back to Nigeria, they really get killed on the exchange rates, because like the government, they do this weird thing with the exchange rates. It's mainly, I think, to help out the farmers, but it really hurts them if people are sending money from overseas. All right, when it gets exchanged back from dollars or the pounds, they lose a lot of value. I think like 30 or 40%. So this is a lot of its worth here. So what they do to get around this, all right, say someone in England, they get paid in pounds. What they do is they exchange these pounds for some Bitcoin. They send these Bitcoins to the relatives in Nigeria. The relatives will take this Bitcoin. They'll use it to buy gift cards. And then what they do is they'll discount these gift cards. Like say if it's $100 worth, they'll sell them for $99 so they can sell them real quick. Okay, they'll lose this dollar in order to to be able to sell it quicker, and then they can get their money in their local currency. All right, so there's a lot of hassle and effort in this, but it's worth it when you're losing that much of your value when you send it overseas. So that's a kind of a neat example of Bitcoin being used here. Also, too, the censorship resistance comes really into play here. Whether it's a Chinese person trying to send trying to invest overseas to get around capital controls. All right, to get around that, or for someone like if you're an activist protesting the government in the country, if you send money to their bank account, it could get frozen. They could take it really easily. But if you send potentially like with Bitcoin to someone's Bitcoin address, well, this is a way that you can send the money without potentially the government knowing about it. Okay, so it does have some uses. I think Bitcoin does have some value. This whole thing, though, where it's going to uproot and like be the money in the future, it's just not really a good money where it can do that here. But it does have some value and uses. Okay. All right. So that's it for the lecture. Does anybody have any questions?
Have you ever purchased Bitcoin before?
Yeah. So I went through the process, and actually I lost my hardware wallet. But I do have the seed recovery where I need to actually do that so I can talk about it. But like I did it just to see what the process that goes into it. So I got a hardware wallet. It cost about $40. I went and I used it to create an address for me, create a private key and all that. And then I transferred some money from my bank account. Okay. So here's another thing, like you kind of lose some of your privacy here when you're first transferring money onto Bitcoin here. What it does give you some privacy though is like when you're actually doing the transactions. That's kind of like, so to me, that's kind of like the government, while they're not U.S. government, while they're not too hard cracking down on it, because if they want to spend the effort to crack down on some kind of criminal, they usually can figure out who it was. And where it comes from is like what we call this on-ramp, where I'm transferring money from my bank account because they check your ID and all that, or where you're off-ramping it, taking the Bitcoin, using it, and transferring it back into money here. So I have used it just to kind of see what it was like. Most people that actually invest in cryptocurrencies, they don't actually keep track of their own private key. They let the online exchanges do it for them. What about you, Dan? Have you ever did any investing or?
No, I mean, currently I'm kind of thinking about investing in the stock markets
Oh,
because a
okay.
couple of my friends, they invested and like it's actually like working. So I'm like, okay, I might give it a shot. So
Oh,
I
okay.
just before the class started, I texted my friend and I'm like, yo, what was the app I used to like invest in stock markets?
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah. Yeah. So with cryptocurrency, a lot of people like it because Bitcoin's not quite as volatile as some of these other ones, but they just because you can gain a lot of money and you can also lose it a lot. So some people just like that. It's almost like for some people, it's like a gambling fix with some of these coins that are that essentially they're just kind of junk coins. as you call it. Have any of y'all, anybody else invested in any kind of cryptocurrency? Anyone? Okay.
Uh, yeah, like I don't think
Oh,
it's
you
a
have? Okay.
yeah, I don't think it's a cryptocurrency, but like I have an app that is called ECONs.
Acons.
Yeah, I mean you can invest in and get
Oh,
your
okay. So no crypto, but you have done some investment. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, usually, I have, it does seem like it's mostly guys that invest like in crypto. It seems like the classes, but there's no guys showed up to class today. So, all right. Any other questions about anything?
Professor Nick, so this is not really about cryptocurrency, but I was wondering, did you ever use RA Rot? I don't know if I got the name right, but do you ever use that?
What is it called now?
RA Rot, I think.
R.A. Rot.
Yeah. It's for investing.
No, I've never used it. I don't really invest a lot. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
my 401k okay, I see this now. All right. It's not, well, it's not it. What is it? What does it do specifically, man? Is it like ask you like
It's
what you're
also
looking
like stock
for?
markets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've heard from a friend saying that it's about some sort of savings kind of thing. I'm not really
Oh,
sure.
okay.
Yeah, I haven't
Oh,
really
okay.
gone in detail about it, but I
Oh,
heard
okay.
that you can only have an account for it if you like have like a job. So,
Ah. Hmm.
hmm
Yeah, I've not heard about it. I might look into it more. It's interesting. So, most economists with investing, their thing is like invest in an index and just hold and don't worry about it. Just let it sit there. You're just basically, having faith that the U.S. economy will keep growing over the long run. And that's essentially what I do. I have, a 401k with the university, and they put it into like a fund, and I don't really do any kind of active investment. But some people like doing it though. I mean, some people you can beat the market, but like it's kind of hard to do it. I actually have a friend that's came up with a some sort of algorithm where he's actually beating the market pretty well, and he's looking to sell it for a couple $1 million. And that's the issue with any. You can find these and come up with these ways to beat the market like that, but you have to keep it secret because if enough people find out about it and use it, then you can't beat the market anymore with it. That's kind of the issue with it. All right. Any other questions? All right. All right. So I'll let y'all go. Let's see. There's something in the chat. All right, Roth. Oh, you talking about a Roth IRA?
Oh wait, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
I
this is a
got
good point. I'll actually talk about this in the class later on. Yeah, yeah. So I'll go ahead and
okay,
yeah,
okay.
a
Yeah, no,
Roth
that's
IRA.
what I was
So what
thinking.
that
I'm like,
does, Dan, you have to pay taxes on it when you invest in it, but like
mhm.
when you retire and you pull your money out, you won't get taxed on it.
Yeah, something like that. That's why I said like something about savings. I don't know. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
wakes
yeah, yeah.
up.
So the
Yeah.
government, they want people to save because this is good for like, for the economy to grow. And so they provide these incentives. One of them is a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. And what this does, you have to pay taxes on it. Still, this whatever part of the salary that you put in that, you still have to pay taxes. But when you pull it out, you retire, you don't pay taxes. A regular IRA or a regular 401k, you don't have to pay taxes on it when you invest it. So, like, say if you put 10% of your salary in a 401k or IRA, you don't get taxed on that part of your salary. But when you pull it all out when you retire, you get taxed on it. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, I
Mhm.
just got confused. That's why I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. So,
Yeah, yeah. That's you just had it backwards. No, yeah, that's
yeah.
yes, a Roth IRA. Yeah, yeah. Okay. If there's no other questions, then I'll let y'all go, and I'll see y'all Thursday in class. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. All right. Bye.
Bye.